Good. Thank you so much for coming to this final session of Business Ethics Week. I truly appreciate the massive participation over the last few days. And as I was saying on Monday, this is the 7th or 8th year we are doing this, and it is getting more and more popular every year. So I'm truly appreciative that you're taking your time, especially on a Thursday afternoon, to come see us. And I'm really excited about our speaker today. Kelly Fitzsimon, has been a friend of the college for quite some time. And over the last few days, what you've heard mostly was issues related to corporate ethics. How do you build the ethical company? What are the things you need to do? And so on. And what I like about Kelly is she brings it at a very personal level. And I think as somebody who's taught the business ethics for quite a while, it all starts with you as people, as individuals in organizations. And I think understanding who you are, looking at your own values and so on is such an important factor. And especially, even if you look at all these instances of unethical kind of disasters like Enron and so on, it all started with a few people who just didn't have that moral compass. So, I'm very pleased to welcome her. And before I let her get going, I'd like to say a few words about her. So she's a well-known serial entrepreneur who has founded, led, and sold several technology startups. Currently, she's the co-founder and director of HarQuen, named one of Gartner's 2013 Cool Vendors in Unified Communication and Network Systems and Services, and also co-founder of the HyperVoice Consortium. In 2011, she was awarded the Silver Tip PwC Entrepreneurship Award, honoring the fastest growing company within the Angel Capital Association portfolio. And in 2013, Speech Technology Magazine honored her with the Luminary Award. So she completed her undergraduate studies at the University of Rochester and also holds a master's degree from Harvard University. And the other thing is actually our Dean Clements was supposed to introduce her, but she's unable to do that because of an advisory board meeting. So she also has a few words about her that I will share with you. So what Dean Clements says is, I have known Kelly for 12 years. Throughout that time, I have been extraordinarily impressed by her sense of true north. As an active entrepreneur, engaged community member, mother of 2 young children, and good friend to many, she lives in a world of complexity and often chaos. But you never doubt that Kelly understands what really matters and what priorities should be. She cares deeply about doing good work and doing the right thing, and it's obvious to all who know her. So please help me in welcoming Kelly Fitzsimmons.
What's got mic? So can everyone hear me okay? I'm mic'd properly? Woohoo! Yay! All right. So it's Thursday afternoon, and the reason you are here is free beer afterwards? Yeah. Is that what they promised? Because they would have had to promise something like that to get me in the seat, I have to say, 20 years ago. Free lemonade. Okay, well that wouldn't have been table stakes for me, just to be honest about it. You probably would have had to do beer and food to get me to show up. So I really honor the fact that you're giving me an hour of your life. And I want to make sure I do well by you. And to do well by you, what my hope is and my intention for our time together is to do 3 things. One is to give you an idea that at the end of this can be helpful, something that can ultimately help you out when you get into a sticky situation. Because the fact of the matter is, we will all be in sticky situations. You may be in a sticky situation right now. You may already be dealing with some sort of ethical dilemma. And if I'm helpful at all, maybe at the end of this hour, you might have a better chance of solving it. I hope. That's my intention. I'm also going to offer an invitation to try some things out. And I'll go through what those are over the course of our time together. And each of these invitations is an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you. And there's a reason for that. Because at the end of the day, this is all about you and the choices you make. Ultimately, we're the product of our choices. And that'll be a theme that you'll hear me coming right back to again and again. But I first have to clean something up, because there was an introduction just made about me, and honestly what Chris said is so awesome that it was too good. But it's too good to believe in some ways, and it's too polished. If you believed my bio to be 100% true and a full representation of who I am as a human being, I have already started this off on the wrong foot. So let me do one thing I need to do, is call myself to the carpet. Because nobody's that polished. A bio, particularly like mine, is designed to manipulate you. It's designed to make you believe something to be true that is not true, fundamentally. A bio like mine is designed to convince you guys that I am smart and I got my together. Truly, right? It's designed to impress. It's designed to make you think I know what's going on and I can speak from Mount High about ethics and personal integrity. And I want to be the first to tell you, if somebody comes to you and says they have the truth around personal ethics and they know how to do this and they have integrity, run. Do not walk. The person is completely full of it. Ethics is complex, it's hard, it's murky, it's personal, it's perspective, it's cultural. No one has the truth here. It's very, very hard. And the other thing about manipulation is something that we do all the time. I'm not just doing it, you do it every single day. We try to present ourselves in the best possible light. Why? To get lucky. It's very straightforward. This is very primal. It's called evolution. If you don't believe in it, it's your prerogative. However, I happen to. And in my experience, people will do anything to look good, to have others perceive them as capable, smart, talented. And in so doing, we lie. And we lie a lot. But the worst lie is the one that starts right here with ourselves. Because if you flash me back 10 years ago, I actually believed my own bio. And I got my stuff together pretty good. I'm pretty talented. And I wasn't self-aware enough to realize the pretense of what I was doing. I didn't have any ability to say, oh my gosh, I'm manipulating people. And in a way, I'm fundamentally lying. And it's not lying. Every word in there is true in my bio. It is true. I can back it up with facts. But it's missing stuff. You could drive a truck through what it's missing. And what it's missing is failure. And I turn out to be incredibly awesome at failing. I do a really good job of it. And when I fail, I fail spectacularly. And so I want to propose, instead of me here to lecture you about ethics, which basically makes my skin crawl, and I think it's a fundamentally wrong thing to do, I'd rather go on a journey with you and tell a series of stories about my experience and some of the dilemmas I've gotten stuck in, and not talk about the polished version, the successful version, the version that gets cleaned up in post and makes me look like a rock star. I'd much rather talk about something that might be actually helpful to you, about allowing myself to look bad for an hour and to tell you what really happened and how I dealt with some really sticky situations and how I absolutely failed at handling them well sometimes. So one of the lies on my resume is a lie of omission, which I love. I do this all the time. I went to Harvard. And if you read how that all goes up, right, you would assume that I have a computer science degree, because I do technical startups, right, from Harvard. I don't. My degree is in comparative religion-focused archaeology. I'm a trained archaeologist. Interesting, huh? All I did was just leave off what my actual degree was in, and I can let you draw your own conclusions about my technical capabilities. It would be a lie to say I don't have any technical abilities. I started coding in 6th grade. But computer science turned out to be wickedly boring, And when I was in college, I was the only girl. And we didn't have things like modems and being able to work from our rooms. We had to work in the lab, down in the basement, 3 in the morning, with a lot of guys who chose not to shower. So, I switched majors. The reason I mention that is because it's subtle, right? I didn't lie. I went to Harvard. I got a master's degree from Harvard. I do. But I led you to believe something else simply through omission, right? How do you guys feel about that? Just curious. Meh. Yeah, I would do it. About 90% of you would do it. That's what science says. That's what the studies say. About 90% of us will do lies of omission, clean things up, make it look better on a resume. I think the 10% may have been a complete outlier or possibly lying. I think we all do this, right? So I want to step into terra firma and start our conversation and our journey together as peers, because I refuse to be held to the Mount Virtue, here are the commandments of how to be ethical, relationship. And so we're going to walk through this as peers on a journey. Now, some of you are going to say, well, you've been ahead of me, so you might know more about this experience. What the truth is I've got 20 years on you, which means that I've got 20 years of more lies, manipulation, cheating, cutting corners, all of it. So unless you are a sociopath, which probably about, given the number in here, there's probably at least 2 or 3 of you. Wow. Yeah, isn't that great? 4%, that's the number. 12 million sociopaths in America, and we're going to circle back to them in a while because they're really interesting. But outside the 2 or 3 of you that are sociopaths in the room, I have more infractions in terms of personal integrity than you can imagine, because you just don't have enough life yet. So this journey, let's start it where I actually know something and I can speak from an area of some expertise, just to ground it and start it, which is in archaeology. So my second year in graduate school, I had the opportunity to go to Greece with 4 professors. And I got to go to a temple, and it was a very famous temple. It's the Temple of Delphi. How many people have heard of the Temple of Delphi? Okay, so the Temple of Delphi was really critical to Greek culture. It was where you went to hear about the future. And so you go to the oracle at Delphi and ask him or her, the priest or priestess, a question. And they would inhale these vapors from this pit, and they would come back and speak in what we would think of as kind of like tongues. And they would say these sort of enigmatic things, and then you'd interpret it and you'd go forward. So the thing that's really interesting about the Temple of Delphi is when you walk in the door, in Greek it's called a propylaeon, there's something that is inscribed literally in stone above the propylaeon. And it's there to set your perspective as you walk in to this misty, magical place. Does anybody know what that inscription is? Well, you'd think it would be something about the future, right? You're going there to learn about the future and what the future is going to be, and you're going to have this priest or priestess interpret it for you, right? So it would be something futuristic, right? It says, know thyself. Know thyself. Know thyself. What the hell does that have to do with anything? What is that about the future? Turns out everything. So there's a story that very early on, a great king in Greece went to the oracle at Delphi and said, I'm thinking about invading my neighbor. What do you think about that? And the oracle came back and said, if you cross the river, a great nation will be lost. With this, the king suited up, clicked his heels, said, hey boys, the oracle says we're in. Charges across the river, only to find out that the great kingdom to be lost was his. That king was missing something. What was the king missing? Self-awareness. Self-awareness is the key. The ability to observe your thoughts. The ability to question yourself. The ability to get out of what you want to hear what is actually being said. And that sounds pretty straightforward, right? It actually turns out to be extremely hard. So hard that almost no one can do it. I can't do it on a regular basis, I can tell you that. I hear what I want to hear all the flippin' time. Now, how do I know that I hear what I want to hear all the flippin' time is another subject, but I will tell you, I've actually recorded all of my conversations for the last 2 years, so I can go back and listen to them. And about the third or fourth re-listen, a certain second, I'm like, oh, that's what they were saying. Now, mind you, I have 10 years of executive coaching on active listening. I'm not a novice at asking good questions. I'm not a novice at feeding back exactly what you said, parroting back exactly word for word what you said. I'm actually quite good at it. And yet, even me, trained and skilled, I don't hear what's actually being said. I hear what I want to hear. So that's really interesting, thinking about the context of today. You guys will hear what you want to hear, no matter what I do. All I can try to do is hope that some word, something in here will resonate with you, and another word won't take you out of here. And what I mean by take you out of here is I could say, for instance, the word hospital. Some of you in the audience have someone in your family who is sick. You have now left the room. You are no longer listening to me. You are thinking about them. Are you following what I'm saying? Listening is really, really hard. And once you start paying attention to how you listen, you will have an amazing realization. You suck at listening. We all suck at listening. And listening turns out to be really, really important. So I'm going to circle back. I'm going to circle back to the Temple of Delphi in this thing and concept of self-awareness. And I'm going to start to personalize it and share a little bit about my background. Because I think it's far more interesting to hear about failure than success, and I think it's a lot more interesting to also tie it to real-life examples. So I started my first company when I was 25 years old, which, just for the record, is a really stupid thing to do. But it's also a really smart thing to do because you have the ego and the hormones cursing in your body that tell you you're invincible and that you're super smart and of course you can do it and everybody else is stupid. That helps, actually. It's a real edge starting a business. And so I got my first company, Sun Tzu Security, off the ground in 1996. We were doing security code auditing, intrusion detection, network forensics. This is 1996. Most people did not know about the web, did not have email addresses. Google was not around, Facebook not even on the horizon. And here I was out there hawking my wares. It took me a long time to be successful in security. But the thing that was really interesting is we had the dot-com explosion around 1999. And here I was in a technical company, technical startup with the dot-com revolution, right? And when I'm reading magazines like Fast Company and stuff, and it's like, why have one company when you can have two? The fundamental laws of math for business, meaning revenue and profits, doesn't matter anymore. Companies are getting IPO that have no revenue and getting market caps of $1 billion. Basically, the world went crazy. Like I told you before, my master's, it's also not in business, right? So I'm believing all this crap. Because I don't know better. I didn't go to the University of Whitewater and get a nice business degree, or accounting. I didn't understand that this was fundamentally flawed. But there were a lot of accountants, lawyers, and businessmen out there that were nodding their heads and agreeing that the math had changed. The businesses didn't need revenue anymore to succeed. Exactly. So here I am. And what do? One company is successful, why not start another? In the process of starting that company, I made every mistake you can imagine. I started with not reading contracts. Why would I read contracts? Those are really, really hard. And I also, took on a ton of capital, and I signed a bunch of personal guarantees. Of course we're going to be successful. No one's ever going to call me on this. My personal net worth at the time was about $250,000 because I owned a condo, which is pretty awesome for somebody at 29. I ended up signing personal guarantees that put me over $5 million. Now, I'm just curious, with the information I've given you, what do you think happens next? Go for it.
Belly up, something bad happened with the business.
.com crash. All the chips are called. The company that gave us $1 million wanted their $1 million back. Oh, and with all this exploding provisions in the contracts that put me on the hook for, yes, $5 million, personally guaranteed. Oops. Now, this is the part where I'd love to say there was this white horse, and there was a knight on it. And he rode into town, and the $5 million fell out of his, satchel. And I walked it over to Park Bank, and I gave it to Kim. I said, "Thank you, Kim." And she's like, "Oh, it's great working with you." And no, that's not what went down. What really went down is that the company that was healthy, Sun Tzu, I had to sell. And I merged it with a company in Chicago, and I came on as the CEO of the combined companies. And I closed and shuttered Prism, which was this other company. And I put the debt, which I was able to whittle down through a series of negotiations to the relatively small number of $2.5 million, on my back, and I ran for 3 years without taking a breath, praying that somehow I could build the business I was now in into something that somebody someday would buy, and buy it for enough money to cancel out my debt. To tell you that I could not breathe would be an understatement. I felt like an elephant was standing on my chest. Every breath for about 18 months hurt. It was like I had deep asthma. I would be lying to you if I didn't say I was suicidal. I was completely suicidal. I thought my life was worth more if I was dead. I had insurance. I just couldn't figure out how to die in such a way that it wouldn't look suspicious. Shark attack was up there. I was thinking Great Barrier Reef, one way to go. Bungee jumping. Turns out I'm also a coward. But after 3 years of doing this, we were lucky. Finally, information security started to become important. We had a great brand. We were able to be bought for a premium. I was able to pay off my debts and have enough money to leverage to start my next company, which was HarQen, 8 years ago. So I pause right there. What do you think failure taught me? What do you think running into that brick wall of $5 million in debt taught me? Curious. Anybody think of anything? Please. How to get back up when you get knocked down. Kinda, yeah.
That's all you can do.
Well, actually, there's other things you can do, and I'll speak to that. You can get drunk for a long period of time. And you don't exactly get up. It's more like you kind of roll along the floor for a while. You might crawl, pass out, throw up, repeat. Go ahead. You were going to say something. Was your hand up? No?
Yeah.
Yes.
That this was kind of your fault?
This was my fault. Ooh. No, I wasn't that smart. I had to blame everybody else for a good period of time. This was certainly not my fault. I was having a really hard time with acceptance. I don't know if you've ever failed big, but if you ever feel spectacularly big, there's a period of time in which you're in deep denial that it's your fault. You will blame everyone, including God, your mother, and the country, before you finally come to the agonizing result that it was you and a series of choices that you made that ultimately led up to you being and looking like the world's biggest ass. True. Any other thoughts?
I was going to say finding out what you're capable of when you're kind of put in a corner, because you never really know until you're given that opportunity to kind of face the, because it's great when things are going great.
Right.
When the chips are down, you kind of find out what you're made of.
Yeah, so finding out what you're made of. Honestly, that came like 5 years later. It's 7 years later, maybe after children. It took me a while to finally pull that piece out of it. Go, please.
That you were wrong the first time, that you were correct, you are invincible, and that you can do it again, so there's always an exit.
Awesome. I would love to say yes to that, that I'm invincible and that I truly can do it and I can manifest businesses out of thin air. Bless you. God, I wish I was that, narcissistic. That would have been awesome. What an edge. No. What I learned was that the thing I desperately didn't want the world to know about me, the thing that I had kept hidden my entire life through incredibly complex strategies, my hidden conclusion that I secretly believed I was stupid, that I was crazy, and that I was a failure, I manifested. I manifested it on a billboard that just filled the sky for me. I am crazy, I am stupid, I am a failure. Let's go back to the bio, the manipulated version of me. I had spent my 20s, and really all those years prior, trying to prove to the world that I was smart. Why would I do that? It's not on my bio. I was born with alcohol-fetal syndrome. I'm dyslexic. I have severe ADHD. I was tested at the tender age of 36. I came out in the 99th percentile. I spoke so fast during the interview when they did the 6 hours of cognitive testing at Fredert that they thought I went to Howard University. No one thought to ask me, oh, isn't that interesting you chose an all-black historic college to go to? I thought it was funny. Found that in the transcript later. I'm like, I would have found that was fascinating. And quite frankly, I would have liked me more if I had. The thing I had run from my entire life, that I had worked so hard to prove to the world that I was smart and capable, not that I had brain damage, not that I was dyslexic and could not read, had 0 reading comprehension at 13, not that I got teased on the playground for all my reversals, my lack of ability to spell. I could talk. So I would try to present myself by finding out in the biggest words I could learn to sound as smart as I could to cover the fact that I was terrified I was retarded. And secretly, I knew I probably was. I grew up in a time when the alcohol labeling started, so that if you picked up a beer, you would see on the side of it, if you're pregnant or even thinking of being pregnant, do not drink this because it will literally kill the baby's brain. Thank you, right here. My mom drank a quart of scotch a day while pregnant with me. So in case you're curious whether or not you can be born, you can. She's a very big woman. She was 6 feet tall. I am not lying about the quantity. It was ridiculous amount of scotch that my mother could consume. And she did a relatively good job of holding her liquor too. So that was a fear I had. And it was grounded in pretty good reality and some childhood taunts and some massive fears. And suddenly I could not look myself in the mirror and say I wasn't stupid. The self-deception was gone. I could plainly see I was stupid. Okay? Crazy. You have a 6-foot-tall mother who is a massive alcoholic and happens to be a former Playboy bunny. She's a little eccentric, likes to dress up in clothes, and completely freak out all your friends. You're too young to remember the Parquet commercials, which were, "It's not wise to fool Mother Nature." My mother would dress up as Mother Nature and come out on the porch when we'd be up in the treehouse and go, "It's not wise to fool Mother Nature." And Go away. She thought this was hysterical. So if you ever want to have a smackdown contest of whose mother is crazier, I just want to say, I so win. So you might see that there might be a little bit of terror for me in being perceived as crazy. So what do? I make myself look so sane. But suddenly, with this event, it was 100% clear to me. There was no self-deception I could dance around, that signing all those contracts was crazy. That was just a completely crazy thing to do. The mess I got myself into was sheer and utter insanity. I was crazy. The failure piece, I think you guys can figure out, but I'll give you some background there. I have a highly successful father. I'm a third-generation entrepreneur. My grandfather before me had started 14 businesses successfully here in Wisconsin, sold one of them to Rockwell Automation for original stock, and retired at 40. He lived to 96. He had 56 years of retirement in yachts. My father started a company when he was a sophomore in college that went on to become the world supplier of machines for paper cups and containers. There is probably not a paper cup or container that you've ever held that wasn't made off of one of my father's machines. And what was he doing? He was trying to protect, he was, interestingly enough, trying to impress Dad too. And just a funny aside story, my father in the 80s got himself a Rolls-Royce Corniche. And my grandfather was in town, was looking at the Corniche and sort of eyeing it and going, Finally said, you know, Donald, you know why you're successful? And here's my dad, at that time, 65 years old, ready, as if he was 13 years old, for the words he'd always wanted to hear, because he's smart enough, because he's talented. You know what he said? My grandfather looked at him and says, because you're lucky. So you might say this is a multi-generational issue that we have in terms of trying to perform and not fail to impress our parents or our father figure. And I had this one big. I had to be successful. I had to. I had the shadow of the success. And I was gonna beat it. And then all of a sudden I had, thanks to this, oh my God, did I fail? Boom. So what happened was actually magic. If you had asked me to go back in time and you would trade me out something, you know, say simple like waterboarding, I would probably take you up on the offer. But what happened to me was magic. It shattered my persona at 29 years old. I could no longer pretend I was who I was pretending to be. I had to face my hidden conclusion. And I had to get good with it and realize that it was driving my life. Everything I did was an intent to impress other people. And as long as I came from a place of impressing other people, I would fail. I'm going to repeat that. As long as I came from a place where I was trying to impress people, I would fail. So, in interest of making this fun, because I know this has been so fun so far, I thought we could play a little game. And that game is, what does success look like? I'm really curious. Do you think that there is actually a definition for success? How many people think there's a true definition for success? Objective, we know it when we see it, there's a truth to it. Come on, guys, go for it, thank you. So everybody else is feeling like it's kind of subjective, it's a point of view, it's perspective, right? And you're right, it is. It really is. You talk to people who've made a lot of money and enjoyed a lot of money, and they're the first to tell you it's hollow. And you'll say, all millions of you are wrong. If it were me, it'd be different. But the truth is, it can't truly buy you happiness. It can buy you friction-free living, but that's not happiness. Turns out about 80K, if you can get to about 80K in the US, that's the threshold. And then anything over that is incremental. It doesn't really move the needle in terms of how you feel about yourself or your life. So good to know when you're negotiating salary. I did not know that at your age. I really, really did think it was the fancy things. And I bought them and I had them. And ironically, I had them most when I was least successful. So when I was, in the process of this great debt, I drove a Porsche. I mean, I had to look the part. And what I learned about this process of really just having myself turned inside out is it really didn't matter. The only person I was fooling was me. Truly. Why not drive a car I really, really like? That gives me pleasure and it's kind of fun, and it's not what anybody else might choose. It's what I choose. So even though I'm more financially, dramatically more financially stable today, I drive a Fiat. I love my little Fiat 500. It's awesome. Totally unpretentious, but I drive it because I like it, not because I have to. So with success comes questions. And what I'd really love to do is turn this over to you and start a dialogue about connecting the dots between success and self-awareness. And also, I promised you some tools. So I'm going to do two things to close out. One, I'm going to do the invitations and a couple things to try out, experiment with, and see what you think. And then I'm going to do Q&A. Does that sound like a plan? All right. So the first game, invitation, is how honest are you? How self-aware are you of your honesty? And quite frankly, I have to say, I really didn't have a clue before I hit the wall. And when I hit the wall, then it started to become painfully obvious very quickly. And the nice thing is, we're all in this together. Everyone lies. There is no such thing as a 100% honest person. There's people who have played around with radical honesty and have found the social consequences of it. It turns out that there is a little bit of lying can be very good for human relationships, but it's very, very complicated. And you guys know this best through the example of, yes, of course, sweetheart, you look amazing in those jeans. Yeah, Mom, everything's fine at school, no problems at all. Honey, I was out late in a work group. I was working on a paper. We all know what it takes to manage our social relationships. And unfortunately, because we have this desire to look good and to have others perceive us as special in some way, we get a little off kilter. 60% of us will lie at least 3 times within a 10-minute conversation. And it's mostly little crap. It's little things. 30% of you will say that you've seen The Godfather. It's an interesting statistic. People will lie about really stupid crap in the intention of they don't want to look like the idiot that hasn't seen The Godfather. So, oh yeah, and you know enough quotes to kind of get yourself through, take them to the mattresses, and then you back away slowly before you get caught. So the first thing is to try a day of radical honesty. This is to turn on the lights. I invite you to just try it, where for one day you cannot tell a lie. See how long you can last. And if it's going really, really well, I invite you to call your mother. And the funny thing is, a couple of you will actually do this. And for the couple of you who do this exercise, it will open your eyes profoundly. And the vast majority of you will quit before you even start. And that's not to say or to judge you guys. It's because it's so flippin' hard. I cannot tell you how many emails I have had to rewrite over the course of the last 10 years because I'd realize I'd start writing an email about why I was late or why this wasn't happening, and it was just BS. It was just ridiculous BS. Yes, and I have to do it all the time because it's not like you stop lying and then suddenly nirvana and it just never happens again. I've gotten into conversations where all of a sudden I'm sounding like an expert in soil erosion. I'm like, what the hell? I don't know anything about soil. There's a name for that, by the way. My husband and I will call each other out from time to time. He's like, oh yeah, I think I read a really interesting article about that in Modern Jackass. So the second invitation. My second invitation for you is to define what success looks like. What is the finish line? More of you will do this or probably have done this. What is your number one thing? And to help you, I'm going to slip over here, and I'm going to give you the top 5 regrets of the dying. Okay? We're going to go to the finish line fast. You ready? Top 5, if I can find it, you are here somewhere, regrets of the dying. Number 1, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Number 1, according to hospice care, regret of the dying. I'm going to reread that one. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Isn't that integrity, guys? Isn't that the heart of integrity? Living the life you want to live, not being holden to what others want you to do. And to be clear, I haven't done that. I'm an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. I assumed that was what I was supposed to do. I didn't realize that for many, many years, I was following a path that had been laid out for me. Before that, the archaeology degree, my mother, more than anything, wanted to get her PhD from Harvard in archaeology. I didn't figure that out until I literally dropped out with my master's. This is hard. Number 2 regret. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So here you all are preparing for a life of very, very hard work. Your 20s will be defined and your 30s will be defined by how hard you work. The elbow grease that you put in now will determine how successful you are in your 30s and 40s. But yet, the dying will tell you, don't work so hard. The prioritization, what happens, you put other things on hold. I have 2 small girls. For the first 7 years of their life, I had a startup. Which of the 3 do you think got most of my attention? That's an issue of integrity. Number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. This is what we do. Most of us don't understand this as a lie. But when you don't speak up and when you don't express your true feelings, it only hurts you. The dying are telling you to speak up. Don't lie about your feelings. Express them. Many people have suppressed their feeling. Oh, number 4. This is the dyslexia. All right. Number 4. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. The first thing you sacrifice when your integrity goes sideways is friendship. It's not obvious. But the friends that you really treasure, they don't want to be around you. It turns out we as animals are incredibly good at detecting lies. We can see it clearly in others. And it's why self-deception has evolved into such a state of the art. Because to deceive others, we must first deceive ourselves. It's pretty profound. Number 5 is I wish I'd let myself be happier. These people are dead. They're gone. They died not being as happy as they could have. Why? Was there a gun to their head? Did somebody tell them that they didn't have the right to be happy? Did they tell them that they had to fall in line and norm with what everybody else was doing? Well, yeah, they did, actually. It was in kindergarten. It was on the playground. It was when we called each other's names, when we hurt each other in fundamental ways when we were really little. And it was in that process of norming each other and trying to make each other more like each other so that we wouldn't stand out, we wouldn't be different, that we hurt each other and scarred each other. So that today, the dying are telling us they're going all the way to their graves, not knowing how to be happy, terrified that if they do what makes them happy, you will judge them and leave them. Now let's be clear. This is a two-way street. You guys can end it. Do what you need to do to be happy. And it can be as freaky as can be. Bless you for that. So on those notes, I'm going to conclude this of talking at you and hopefully be able to get some questions in. And the one idea I just want to seed in there is that fear is the enemy. Being afraid of others and what they think of you is truly the enemy. As long as you live a life trying to impress others, you will fail. And every time you fail, it's cumulative. The lapses we see at Enron and other places, they're not big lapses. They're thousands of tiny lapses underneath it, all of which were done for a lot of social reasons and a lot of social pressures that each and every one of you will feel the heat at some point for. There's very few truly evil people in the world. Technically about 4%. So 96 of us are really, really trying. And we really care. And wouldn't it be really great to give each other the gift and the freedom of not judging each other so that people can truly be happy? And giving yourself the freedom of letting go of the idea that you have to impress others, opposed to just be. Just be yourself. Show your flaws. Your flaws are what connect you. And once you start doing it, you'll find that other people will respect you for it because they can see authenticity in that. And that's the heart of integrity. All right, thank you. Questions? This is the fun part, guys. Questions. Have courage. Ask questions. Please. Yay!
So I was just wondering where you draw the line or how you feel about working so hard to impress others versus working really hard to impress yourself.
It's a great question. And they're totally different dynamics. I work incredibly hard to impress myself now. I'm the only one that matters in terms of whether or not I am impressed. And I'm not impressed, it turns out, by the things that I thought I was. What I'm really impressed with is when I can sit down and be on the floor with my girls and play a game. That's hard for me. I know it's hard for me. And so I'm a much better judge of the things that genuinely make me happy, and I'm also a better judge of what actually is hard for me. And so I can be impressed with myself when I do things that to you may sound like, oh, well, of course, that's totally normal, that's easy. I don't have a lot of role modeling here, so being a mother is actually very scary and hard for me. And so I'm impressed with myself when I take my daughter to the doctor, and do the normal mommy things. I'm like, wow, hey, I did that. That wasn't terrifying. So I think that the key is learning to know yourself so well that you know what you're afraid of, and having the willingness to step into it and to be really uncomfortable. And if I could define entrepreneurship for you guys, entrepreneurship, and having done this 5 times now, I think I got a pretty okay handle on what works. I would say that entrepreneurship is the ability to stay in discomfort for an unreasonably long period of time. You just stay in it and keep going while everybody else can't take it and drops off. And quite frankly, my childhood was perfect for that. So for those of you who really had a messed up childhood, it's actually really much better for very chaotic environments like startups. We tend to thrive in chaos, and it's an advantage, something to know. Are anybody curious what the top, let's say, 3 or 4 professions of sociopaths are? Does anybody want to know what that is? Yeah, go for it. What do you think? CEO, number 1. I've been a CEO 5 times. So I'll let you conclude. Lawyer is number 2. Media, number 3. Salesperson, number 4, and that too. Journalist, I'm actually that too. I write for Inc. and for Information Week. Policeman, I'm not that. Clergyman, I kind of went and got a theological degree. Chef, civil servant. Those are your top 10. Was that 9? Did I miss one? Media, surgeon. I forgot surgeon. Surgeon's number 5. Now, just to be clear, I think it's a good thing that surgeons are sociopaths. Truly. I mean, you don't want them to give it. Truly, when they're working on you. There's a reason why surgeons do not work on their own family, right? They're just, obsessed with getting it right. Perfect. I'm okay with that. I don't need you to feel. We don't have to have beers afterwards. Yes.
So all the companies that you have sold, did you start from scratch?
Almost.
Almost all of them?
The Neohapsis, I didn't start from scratch, but I merged it with a company I did start from scratch.
Okay.
So 4 of the 5.
So recently there's been a lot in the media about these companies being bought and sold for extraordinary amounts of money, and
Yeah.
that is ethically wrong. What's the difference between you and them?
It's a great question. They got luckier. I mean, truly, that's the game. The game with this technical startup is to create something that's heading in a trajectory that by compressing time with innovation, you get a very large company that cannot move fast enough to do it themselves to just buy you. And whether or not it's ethically wrong to pay billions of dollars for something like WhatsApp, or Paycom is going public, remains to be seen. Innovation's really flipping hard. And big companies do not do it well. And what they're looking for and what they're paying for is de-risking a deal, meaning that you've actually acquired users and revenue. So from an ethical standpoint, the reason why those exist is because it's a numbers game. It's truly a random system. It's kind of like a lottery. And it becomes incredible competition about these small few companies that are at the right place at the right time. And there's a lot of examples of this that get the billion-dollar exit. Everybody screams and moans and can't believe it, but the fact of the matter is they're paying that because they don't want Google to have it, or they don't want Apple to have it. That's not evil. That's competition. There's much more evil stuff out there, truly, than the numbers on the exit. And I don't begrudge any of the entrepreneurs that get those big exits. What I will say is that if it's a first-timer, if it's typically one of the guys in their 20s or early 20s that exits in one of these stratospheric exits, it dooms them, truly. I've met a couple of these guys, and unfortunately I haven't met any gals who've had a billion-dollar exit yet. But we're only 16% of the venture-funded companies. And they think it's them. They think they really did it. They think it's like, wow, I'm so brilliant. I'm so genius. I sold a company for $16 billion. And it's hard not to believe your own press when everybody is putting you on the cover of Forbes and saying, yeah, man, you're a genius. Yeah, no, it's not that straightforward. What you don't see is the survivor bias. Underneath that one guy that makes it, or one gal that makes it, there's literally millions of startups that have failed. Millions of them. And that's why the premiums get paid, because startups fail so fast and so hot that if they're able to somehow break through that trajectory layer and actually get out there and start attracting hundreds of millions of customers, that's really meaningful. And for companies like Facebook, even Google, they require that. Because it's really hard to get people's attention today. Incredibly hard. You guys, we fight for your attention. New startups, you can start a startup for $5,000, but you won't get anywhere. You need about 20 million in venture capital to market yourself so that you can get above the noise layer so somebody notices you and actually keeps your app. We just moved the choke point from the beginning, where it used to be you have to have a lot of capital, down the road to get noticed and break through, you need enough capital to have that trajectory. So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
I was just thinking about Time Warner. 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
Bought it, sold it, 60 days, made it work, just a ton of money. But you started yours from scratch and sold it, and I see the difference there.
Mm-hmm.
But justifying taking something that was worth X amount of dollars, put some time, effort,
Mm-hmm.
and then selling it for Y and
Mm-hmm.
making money on it. I guess I don't see the problem, but I'm just curious.
No, I don't either. I mean, it's, house flipping. I mean, I believe in market. I believe in the market will bear what the market will bear. And the market is not ethical, but it's not necessarily unethical. But there are elements within the market that are unethical. And, the thing that's really interesting about CEOs being at the number one of the list of sociopaths is that the qualities that you need to really be a great CEO tend to be a bit sociopathic. And that's scary. It's really scary. Just for the record, I don't think I'm a great CEO. I'm a really great founder. But once it starts to get into the people business beyond, we start talking about beyond 50 employees, I start to get really itchy. Because once you start getting beyond 50, you have to have a director of HR. And my joke is as soon as we get a director of HR, their first job is to fire me. People are hard. Questions in the back?
You were talking about the importance of honesty and how you want to portray yourself. Do you think the need of political correctness that's coming into this feel-good generation can have any sort of conflicts with that?
Absolutely. Political correctness hit the campuses in about 1990, right as I was going into college, I graduated in 89 and went into college in 90. And it was so stifling. People couldn't debate. You'd start to say that and they'd say that's sexist, that's chauvinist, that's racist. And you put a label on something like that and holy God, you don't want to be that. And suddenly you're not talking from a place of curiosity, or you are dancing to try and figure out how you can say what you need to say without being perceived as one of those isms. And that's not education. It really isn't, because how am I supposed to check the embedded assumptions in my head that my grandfather, who, oh, God bless his soul, was pretty darn racist and said a whole bunch of crap to me when I was a little kid. How am I supposed to get that out of my head and figure out what it's about and test it and actually go, oh, this is garbage, let's rewrite this? If you don't have conversations that are honest. And that sucks. It really sucks, because what it does is we try to talk about things that are hard and that are complex and don't feel good, and we're doing it with both our hands and our feet tied behind our backs so that we don't look like idiots or racists or whatever. You put that judgment of yourself out there. And honestly, it's really sad. It's really sad. And I stepped in it pretty hard in both college and graduate school, because I am not a fan of authority. So when it comes to ethics and integrity, a lot of people believe in rule following, and that's the core of it. And I'm actually on the opposite end of the spectrum in a pretty big way. I challenge authority. My leadership profiles have come back again and again in terms of willingness to submit to domination on a scale of 0 to 100. I routinely score a 0. If I was a guy, that would mean I'm intolerable as a human being, just so you know. But it wasn't part of the model when they made these leadership models, because women weren't leaders then. It's a very different trait in a female. But my point on that is that how do you question authority? How do you really ask hard questions? Questions that ultimately open you up and make you look vulnerable, because they might sound stupid, or they might blow open some sort of embedded belief. When everyone's pretending, I'm not this, I'm not that. How do you do it? You can't. You can't have an honest conversation. And I think it really set back, some core conversations, and, my world, feminism, set back some really, really important conversations around equal pay, decades. It hurt us terribly. I think it hurt a lot of communities, because we pretend like we just don't talk about that. Really? Because it's kind of a big elephant in the room. Kind of a big deal. We should talk about that, but we don't. It's uncomfortable.
You talked about honesty, kind of piggybacking him, the interview process, I can't see how that'd be beneficial.
How being what in the interview process? Honesty in an interview process. That's awesome. That's a great question. How would that, can anybody answer that other than me? How would being honest in an interview process be helpful or beneficial?
When asked, I can see it being beneficial, but to open yourself up.
Right. Go for it.
Oh, well, to answer the question.
Yeah.
Well, if you suck at lying, then they'll notice them, then they won't trust you very much at all, and you're just not likely to get it.
Right. Well, that's absolutely an issue. The other piece of it, I would argue, is most job applicants don't flip it, which is, do I want to work for this company? And by giving honest answers to the questions, you'll quickly suss out whether or not this is a company that you can tolerate. Their culture will come through. And so few of us, we're also focused on we have to get a job, we have to start earning money, we have to get out of our parents' basement. And we're willing to take whatever's handed to us. But you forget, this is your life. You could die tomorrow. Why in the hell would you take a job with a company that happens to be, say, have a really, narrow vision in terms of women and what women can do, right? And that's my case. And if I was answering their questions honestly, they would identify me as not a candidate, but I would also identify them as not the company for me. It also, for people who are really skilled interviewers, and I guarantee I know a lot of recruiters, and this is not true across the case, but there are some very gifted interviewers, it's not just seeing through it. When they see authenticity, they light up like a Christmas tree. It's so rare in a job interview to actually see somebody show up as themselves, right?
Especially if you can tell what you're doing to work on it, to get better, or improve.
Or be honest and say, I suck at this. If the job really entails X, I'm not detail-oriented. I was once employed, one of my first jobs out of graduate school was as a receptionist. And it was hired by a family friend. And I already admitted I'm dyslexic, right, which is kind of a handicap when you have to punch numbers and transfer people. Turns out it's not just a handicap, it makes it pretty much impossible. So every time the phone would ring, I would freak out and I would forget the name of the company. So the name of the company was Muller Enterprises. And I would answer the phone, Muller Annuities, Muller Entertainment. One day I answered the phone, Midwest Express. I got the initials right. And I had transferred so many people to the wrong numbers that there was a revolt. And they went to Peter and they said, she has to be fired. I was there less than a month. And so Peter took me aside, and I'll never forget it. We're in the, sort of in the break room, and he looks at me, just begging in his face. He's like, you went to Harvard. Couldn't understand how somebody who could be this stupid in this domain. Turns out I'm amazingly bad in this domain, right? But who would ever guess somebody so incompetent in that domain could also make a really good founding CEO? You would never guess it. And so my point to you is, it's really important to know yourself, what you're good at, and be able to be honest about that. Because they might turn to you and say, you know what, this isn't the right job, but I have an open rec over here where you're perfect. How much better is that? There is huge benefits with showing up as yourself. And it's not just the dying that are telling us this. You'll experience it in terms of showing up at the right places and not giving your life away to the wrong opportunities because you felt like you had to. Does that make sense? Yes.
All right.
Oh, we have to get you a mic. Hold on.
All right, so you're obviously a very successful woman in what you do. What motivated you? Because you have a level and then you go to your next level. And the people who get to that next level are the people who are usually more successful than the people below them, obviously. So what made you want to not just crawl in a hole and
die?
Because everything basically pointed at you and said, you're determined to fail, like you were born to fail.
I was born to fail. There was no question. I can't. I just didn't know better as part of it. You know, I didn't get the memo. I was like completely such a loser. You know, this is where hidden conclusions can be a little bit helpful. Like I said, this is all complex. But the drive to prove everybody wrong, that I wasn't stupid, I wasn't crazy, I wasn't a failure, had some good outcomes. It was the wrong energy. It was bad energy, and it wasn't something that was sustainable. But it was something that got me out of bed in the morning and kept me going. I will prove them wrong. And unfortunately, that energy will ultimately take you to, I will prove them right. But the hope is you get off that train before it has dire consequences like mine did. Hopefully most people wake up and get a little smarter sooner than I did. I just happened to have a really thick skull. And I needed a really bad event to wake me up. And like I said, I'm incredibly grateful for it, but yeah, and you want to talk about leagues. For a female doing what I am, I'm very rare. I mean, I raised $8 million in capital for HarQuen. Venture capital for women-led business is less than 16% nationally. For women to be both a founder and CEO is less than 1% combined. So I really milked that negative energy. I really milked it. But I didn't get successful until I woke up. It was really honestly with Neohapsis that I started to wake up, and we had a really good exit, and I think a lot of that had to do with me in the process of getting aware of who I was and what my flaws were and where my weaknesses were and where I could be successful and where I should put my energies and stop trying to do the things that I was bad at and really take on the things and only do the things I was really exceptional at. And if you want to try out one of my favorite tests, it's called Strength Finders. I believe highly in strengths. I believe that if you work and put energy towards your strengths, you will become so strong in those areas. And if you put the same amount of energy into your weaknesses, you may someday, after 20 years, get mediocre there. So forget about your weaknesses and really double down on your strengths, perfect your strengths, hone your strengths. And you can find out what they are. It's a great test. I use it for all my employees, for myself, a lot of the coaching work I do. It's amazing what it'll surface. So StrengthFinders 2.0, you can find it on the internet. It's done by Gallup Poll International. And I think it's like $14 to buy the book. Any other questions? Yes?
So what strengths do you have as a female CEO?
Well, yeah, and I'm going to broaden it because, I don't know. I'm always hesitant to gender gap it. I don't know. I don't know if it's female. But I'll tell you what my strengths are. Maybe you guys can guess. So my high note is ideation. I'm fabulous at brainstorming new ideas. Strategy. I'm really good at looking out and finding that point. Unfortunately, I tend to be so flippant early. I'm like 7 years before anybody goes, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And that's very, very painful. Positivism. I always thought this was a one. Like, oh my God, seriously, I get positivism. Like, what does that mean? I'm happy all the time? Well, it turns out it's really my core that keeps me in there, because I keep thinking it's got to be better than this. It'll be better. I can make it better. And that positivism keeps me in the game for that unreasonably long period of time that it really takes to get a successful startup off the ground. You hear about the anomalies where they flip in a couple of years. The Angel Capital Association came out and said it's usually on average it's about 8 years before an exit happens. So imagine getting 8 years of your life, morning, noon, night, everything. It's exhausting. So choose the right startup if you're going to go that way. Moral. Positivism, ideation, communications is another strength of mine. So I've made an effort to do a lot of public speaking. I enjoy it. And it's something for me that it comes pretty easily. And then there's another one in there. But it's not the traditional ones like command. That's a very common CEO one. Meh. I don't really care. Which if you look at my leadership of willingness to submit and, not be dominated, you would think that I would be like, I have to be in charge, which is what that means. Just doesn't apply to females, evidently. So the tools are dated. StrengthsFinders actually seems to be pretty gender neutral. But know that too for yourself, women, as you're going in and getting these assessments done. A lot of employers, particularly large ones, insist on them. And feel free to challenge it and say, you know what, these results, what are they based on? Who are they based on? Oh, that's right, they were developed in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Were women in the office then? Oh, interesting, who's missing from this data set? Just a data point. So, questions? All right. Oh, go ahead. Yes, please.
What advice would you give to someone hypothetically who has ADHD, who is a sociopath, who just wants to be equally successful as his two older brothers? Hypothetically? Hypothetically, I've got this friend, who knows this. Well, first off, there's a lot in that. The ADHD part, startups are a great place for people with ADHD. Most of us have it. It's sort of self-selecting, because if you really cannot, channel the amount of information and switch between tasks that you need to, and also, truly, the key thing is the hyperfocus, which most people don't know about ADHD, but I become near autistic when I get into something. So when I used to code, I would go down for like 16 hours, and somebody would have to, if they tapped me on the shoulder, I'd whack them, I would just freak out, it's not good. That hyper-focus is a huge edge for people with real ADHD. The other piece of it is sociopathic, we're all in spectrum. It's not like there's a line that says, I am, 100% sociopathic. Well, there is evidently, there's 4% that are just over the line and don't give a shit about anything. But most of us are on a spectrum. And depending where you are on that spectrum, these career paths are actually the ones I laid out, do make a lot of sense. The key thing is, just because you don't give a shit doesn't mean that you can't learn to try. Because it's really helpful in terms of having honest relationships with people. The problem is if you're truly sociopathic, you are actually missing the ability to do that. There's something truly wrong with your amygdala. Don't know what it is, but evidently you just don't encode information in the way that's necessary to really understand fundamentally how it feels to be in somebody else's shoes. Empathy is gone. And the vast majority of us have low empathy, but it's not gone. We kind of wince when we see somebody in pain, or we feel badly if somebody's suffering. It's why we'll get mad sometimes when somebody's in a bad mood and try to cheer them up immediately, because our mirror neurons are saying, oh, I should feel like that, and you're making me feel like that, and I want to change it. I don't want to change my state. So like I said, it's a spectrum. And again, it goes right back to the beginning. Know yourself. If you do have sociopathic tendencies, that's not good or bad per se. It's how you apply them in the world. And I just say, please use your powers for good. Yeah, please.
And I ask you that as a parent. I hope I don't bore others. But you talk about this pressure coming from your parents and your grandparents, and in some ways it didn't turn out too bad for you because you did, and you went through some struggles. And I think, us as parents, we want our kids to do well.
Right.
And now with your daughters, and it may sound sexist, are you doing anything to protect them from this kind of pressure?
So hard. Oh my God, the girl question. Oh, I'm surrounded in flipping princesses. I was a tomboy. I didn't play with dolls. I had chemistry sets, and I like to blow things up. So I really have a hard time with the princesses. But my sister's super into it. And so right now, all I hear is Frozen. And dear God, help me. I might literally have a nervous breakdown. So the point, which I think all of you can relate to, is the question of parents that are hovering, are overly protective, the ones that are really trying to, channel you towards success. Sometimes it's your parents might be first generation, and you've got, the immigration, learning to cope with a new culture. the access to education. You might be first generation to go to college. And those whole things come into play in terms of how it feels. And you're doing this, you're here. Are you doing it for others or are you doing it for you? And I ask that because it's how you metabolize struggle, is how you perceive it. And so back to your larger question, Praveen, and I want to make sure I include everybody here, but the reason why I am like I am and able to do the insane things that I'm able to do has a lot to do with the fact that I had incredible amounts of struggles early on. Now here I have 2 children that, their sense of struggle is we're not going to go to the Dells this weekend. I'm not going to let them go on that particular water slide. Right, exactly. And so how do I create 2 fearless CEOs that are going to go out and kick ass and take names and raise venture capital and do great things that have no sense of struggle like I did? And I don't have a good answer. But I will say that it's a matter of perspective. And I've seen this again and again. My struggle is more intense in terms of the story I've shared with you around it, but it actually, for somebody else who metabolizes stress differently and doesn't have positivism, maybe has more of a glass is half empty, their situation, their home stress could have empirically been, mom and dad fight at night, dad might have an extra cocktail, occasionally I get screamed at and go to my room. For that individual and their sensitivity, they could have metabolized it in a way that was far worse than me and how I dealt with my situation. So it's relative, is my answer, and I don't have a good answer about parenting. And all I can say is to you guys, the one big shock to me that you'll hopefully get at some point if you do choose to have children is how much you want to immediately go and apologize to your parents. I am so sorry. I was such an ass. And I keep saying that pretty much for the last 7 years to my mom and my dad. Because, like I said, before I kind of woke up, I blamed them for everything that went wrong. And actually, with my mom and her drinking and and having alcohol fetal syndrome, it was super easy to blame her. But the truth of the matter is, you guys are on your own course. It's every choice you make is yours. There's nobody else. And I invite you to try to get to know yourself better, and in the process, take off the blinders so that when you are making choices, you're aware you're making choices and that you're comfortable with the choices you're making, because ultimately that's the accumulation. Our life is nothing but the sum of the choices we make. So how about I leave that on that note? Thank you.
As I was reflecting on her speech and I was thinking, I probably did lie a few times today for sure, but the one thing I told you is she's an amazing speaker and she's going to share amazing, nuggets of wisdom, and on that I'm true today, so I feel good, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is fantastic. So, and before you leave, don't forget that there are sign-up sheets passing around. If you showed up for credit, do sign up. And then on your way out, grab some cookies or lemonade, and you can just get some vodka at home or something.
Lemonade and vodka. I heard that.
Yeah, that's right. So that's where I'm going now. So have a good night. Thank you so much, and see you next year. Thank you.
Yeah.